I still remember the sound that morning. It wasn't just the crunch of gravel. It was the sickening snap of wood tearing. My hand-painted, heavy-duty private property sign. Split clean in half. Dust rising behind a shiny white luxury SUV. The kind that looks like it's never seen mud. With a gaudy little WA logo plastered on the door. Behind the wheel was Tiffany Thorne, the self-declared queen of Stone Creek Preserve. Barreling across my land like she owned the whole county. Like the 15 years of sweat and back-breaking work I put into this ranch meant absolutely nothing. She didn't even slow down. Just gave me that smug, practiced little wave through her tinted window. The kind that screams, "Yeah, I see you," and "No, you can't stop me." And right then, something inside me cracked louder than that signpost. That was the precise, defining moment I stopped trying to be the polite rancher next door. If Tiffany wanted a shortcut across my life, then by God, I was going to give her one straight down. See, if you've lived on a piece of land long enough, it stops being just property lines and starts being part of your own skin. For me, that road running from the highway down to the barn wasn't just a path, it was my history. My connection to the outside world. When the storms washed it out, I was the one out there at dawn, hand grading, leveling, patching it up so the feed truck could make it through without losing an axle. That road was my pride, my peace, and for 15 years, nobody touched it. Then Stone Creek Preserve popped up over the ridge, one of those sterile, beige, luxury communities where everything looks photocopied 100 times. And Tiffany Thorne arrived, quickly establishing herself as the self-appointed sheriff of suburban order. At first, it was just tire tracks. I told myself, oh, some new resident got lost. It happens. I even chuckled about it. But then it happened again. And again. And again. Every morning around 7:30. Like clockwork, that white SUV with the chrome trim would appear from the WA side, kicking up a rooster tail of dust as it flew across my road. Straight onto the highway. Sometimes she'd flash that fake friendly smile. Most days she didn't even bother. She'd blast some terrible pop music, scare the cattle, and vanish. You know that feeling when you watch someone do something so brazenly disrespectful that you just stand there with your mouth open, holding a bucket of feed, wondering if you're actually seeing what you think you're seeing? That was me, every morning. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I put up a bigger sign. Heavy oak. Painted it myself. Private road, no trespassing. Planted it right in the middle of the curve where she always passed. Clean, simple, impossible to miss. The next morning, the SUV rolled through again, and the sign was gone. I found it later, snapped clean in half, hidden behind my hay bales like some kind of twisted trophy. That's when the truth sunk in. This wasn't ignorance. This was pure, unadulterated arrogance. That night, watching the sunset bleed over the hills, I saw the headlights again, bouncing and cutting across the field like two angry eyes. I thought about the sheer nerve of that woman, driving through my life, kicking up dust and threats. It hit me. She didn't just want convenience. She wanted control. Folks like her don't see soil or sweat. They see lines on a map that they think they can redraw with enough votes and a confident tone. By the time I finished my beer, I was done being polite. If she wanted a shortcut through my life, she was about to get one she'd never forget. The next morning, I called Mitch Healy, my oldest friend, the only man I knew who owned a backhoe and had an unlimited sense of humor. "Mitch," I said, "you ever feel like teaching karma how to dig?" There was a long pause. Then his deep laugh crackled through the phone. "Caleb," he said, "tell me when, and tell me how deep." And just like that, the seed of revenge was planted. 2 days later, the absurdity peaked. Tiffany showed up right on my land with folding chairs, clipboards, and balloons, hosting a community access vote, sipping iced lattes and acting like a general before battle. "Morning, Caleb," she chirped, megaphone in hand. "Perfect timing. We're just about to start the vote on integrating your road as a shared access point. Community connectivity is essential for harmony." I just stared at her. "Tiffany, you're standing on private property." "Oh, don't be silly," she laughed, like explaining something simple to a slow child. "The board already agreed this portion is part of the common easement. We're just finalizing it democratically." A democratic vote to steal my road. You can't just vote on someone else's property. I fumed. Well, actually, Caleb, the HOA Charter allows us to make recommendations that align with community needs. Once we file a motion with the county, it's just a matter of formality. Formality. I pointed toward the table. Take this circus off my property before I do it for you. She smiled that sweet, porcelain smile. You'll regret not cooperating with the community. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes when you realize you are living next to a genuine lunatic. That night, the letter came, laminated, color-coded, signed with Tiffany's flourish, and that awful little signature smiley face. It threatened fines, legal action, and a violation of regional community standards. I crumpled it, smoothed it out, evidence. I reminded myself, keep every piece of crazy. I called Mitch again, worse than coyotes. Mitch, the kind that drives SUVs and files community motions. HOA varmints. Got it. What's the plan? Something educational, something humbling. The next morning, Mitch showed up, thermos in hand, grin wide as Texas. We walked the length of the road. Studying the slope, I pointed to a spot halfway down, right after a blind bend where the ground dipped. There, she hits that stretch doing at least 30. She'll never see it coming. Philosophical trench, my specialty. Mitch chuckled. We spent the day hauling the old backhoe out and digging. Every scoop of dirt felt like reclaiming a piece of dignity. By sundown, the trench was done, 3 feet wide, nearly 4 feet deep, enough to catch a heavy SUV. But not deep enough for real harm. Just enough to make a point. We covered it carefully with old plywood, packed dirt over the top, scattered loose twigs and grass. From a distance, it was flawless. We stood there afterward, leaning on the backhoe, sipping cold beers. Looks like a work of art, Mitch said proudly. Modern rural installation, I agreed, titled, Consequences of Entitlement. We set up the 2 hidden trail cameras. As I walked back to the house, the air felt cooler, lighter. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, peaceful, even. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's quiet, precise, and beautiful. The next day, I woke before sunrise, pulled out a couple of folding lawn chairs behind the hay bales, and waited. Mitch showed up with donuts. Today's the day, he whispered. It's Friday, I said, and Tiffany Thorne never misses her Friday yoga class. Then, in the distance, we heard it, that familiar roar of tires, the faint thump of bass, and the high-pitched voice of a woman yelling affirmations to a podcast host about manifesting her power. Tiffany Thorne was on her way. Mitch nudged me. Here comes the queen of asphalt. Through the shimmering heat waves, her white HOA-issued SUV appeared over the hill. Chrome flashing. She was right on schedule. Sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. Yoga mat in the passenger seat. Screaming into her phone about setting boundaries with people who don't understand community cooperation. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. She hit the bend fast. Too fast. The front tires rolled onto the plywood. The faintest creak echoed across the still morning air. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for. Crack. The plywood gave way, and in an instant, the front end of her suburban tank plunged straight down. The SUV nosedived into the trench, headlights disappearing, the back tires lifting off the ground before slamming down again. A puff of dust and airbag powder exploded through the open driver's window. Tiffany's scream cut through the air, a high-pitched wail somewhere between shock and pure denial. The car horn blared once, then died. Mitch nearly fell off his chair laughing, and I had to slap a hand over my mouth to stay quiet. The whole thing looked like an action movie in slow motion, karma making its grand entrance. For a few glorious seconds, she just sat there, stunned, covered in airbag dust, frozen like a statue of poetic justice. Then her door flew open. She stumbled out, clutching her phone like a weapon, screaming into the air, "Sabotage! You've put my life in danger. This is a criminal act." I nearly lost it when she tripped over her own yoga mat and dropped her iced latte into the trench. The splash of cold coffee across her shiny white bumper was the final perfect touch on the masterpiece. We knew she'd call the cops. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, Sheriff Jedediah's cruiser pulled up. Sheriff Jedediah, a tall man whose face was permanently carved into the look of. I've seen worse. walked over and adjusted his hat. Scanning the scene, the nose-dived SUV, the ditch, and me and Mitch standing innocently behind our hay bales. "Morning, ma'am," he said slowly. "Everything all right here?" "All right?" Tiffany shouted. "Do I look all right?" "This man dug a trap." "A trap? My vehicle is destroyed. I could have died." Sheriff Jedediah sighed that long, heavy sigh that only lawmen and tired fathers know. "Mr. Vance," he said calmly, "you want to explain what's going on?" "Sure do, Sheriff," I replied, pointing at the ditch. "That right there is a soil erosion project. Been planning it for weeks. This here's private property, and she's been trespassing every day for months." Tiffany gasped like I'd accused her of witchcraft. "Erosion project? Don't insult my intelligence. This was intentional. You can't just dig holes on a public road." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Public road?" He looked at me. "No, sir," I said, pulling a folded county map from my back pocket, already laminated. "Just in case. Here's my property line. The road's been mine since I bought the ranch. Deeds on file." Sheriff Jedediah studied the red boundary line, then looked at Tiffany. "Ma'am, this is Vance land. You don't have legal access through it." Tiffany's jaw dropped. "That's ridiculous. We're all part of the same community." "Except he's not in your WA," the sheriff stated flatly. "And unless your community charter overrules county property law, which I doubt, this road ain't yours." Tiffany turned bright red, waving her phone. "I demand an investigation. He endangered me and the integrity of the neighborhood." The sheriff pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, I'll file a report, but from where I'm standing, it looks like you drove into an active worksite that didn't belong to you." He paused. Then in the calmest tone imaginable, he said, "You might want to call a tow truck." She looked like she might explode. "I will. And you haven't heard the last of this, Sheriff." He just nodded. "Ma'am, I hope not. I could use the entertainment." We watched as the tow truck arrived, only for the driver to declare, "Lady, this thing's not coming out without a crane." Tiffany's second scream echoed across the fields, loud enough to startle the cows. But I knew this was just the beginning. She was the kind of person who doubles down. Sure enough, the paperwork started flying. First, the fines, $100 a day until the trench was filled. Then came her cousin, lawyer Doug Phillips, a nervous, short round man who was working on his law degree at community college. He handed me papers with worse grammar than the Comic Sans letter. Claiming I'd been served, I gave them back, telling him to at least hire a lawyer who'd passed the bar. Not the smoothie bar. But Doug's visit lit a fire under me. Tiffany wasn't going to stop until she found a loophole. I decided to beat her to it. I drove straight to the county clerk's office, the place that smells like old paper and slow time. And I asked for every single recorded easement tied to my ranch bordering Stone Creek Preserve. It took 2 hours and a stack of dusty file boxes. And then, I found it, a faded document titled, Easement Agreement, Stone Creek Development, 1976. I read every word twice. It stated that as a condition for building the subdivision, the developers were explicitly barred from using or modifying any pre-existing private agricultural roads. In plain English, their shared access dream was dead 40 years before Tiffany bought her beige box house. It was valid, notarized, and never revoked. I laughed out loud, an honest, belly-deep rancher's laugh. I drove straight home, the yellow document sitting on the passenger seat like a holy relic. That afternoon, I made the personal delivery. I walked up to Tiffany at her mailbox, calm as a preacher on Sunday. "Morning, Tiffany. I brought you something better than an apology. A little history lesson." I handed her the laminated copy. She took it with suspicion. And as her lips silently read the title, her face froze. What is this?" "The original easement contract," I said, "signed in 1976. It says your development had to build its own road and couldn't use mine. Ever." She stared at the page like it might rewrite itself. "This can't be valid. This is ancient." "It's notarized," I said, "and still legally binding. County confirmed it this morning." For 5 glorious seconds, Tiffany Thorne didn't speak. Then she tried to crumple the page, except it was plastic. The raw, pure frustration on her face when the lamination wouldn't fold was almost heartbreaking. "Almost. Why are you like this?" she hissed. You could have just shared. Tiffany, I said softly, you drove a tank through my property, tore down my signs, and threatened me with Comic Sans. We passed good neighbors 6 months ago. But your road trip sure is over. I got back in my truck, leaving her standing there clutching her piece of plastic just as she couldn't bend to her will. 2 weeks later, we were in court. My lawyer, Mara Pritchard, was surgical. She had that quiet, unbothered confidence of someone who'd buried bigger egos than this one. Tiffany arrived in a beige power suit, flanked by her frantic, unlicensed cousin, Doug. The judge, old Judge Holloway, looked bored until Mara presented the 1976 easement. This looks legitimate, he stated. Tiffany's face went scarlet. Then came the comedy set, Doug's cross-examination. Mr. Vance, he said, pacing nervously, would you say you enjoy digging holes? I blinked. Excuse me? You have an affinity for excavation. Sure, I said dryly, mostly when the land needs it. Judge Holloway leaned back, unimpressed. Son, are you trying to argue that owning a shovel is evidence of criminal intent? Doug deflated. Possibly. The whole courtroom burst into laughter when Mara played the trail cam footage of Tiffany's SUV crashing nose first into the trench. Even the bailiff covered his mouth. Finally, the judge set his glasses down. I've seen enough. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Vance. He ordered Tiffany and the WA to pay damages for property destruction and harassment. But the best part? The judge looked straight at Tiffany. Effective immediately, Miss Phillips is removed from her position and barred from holding any WA office for the next 10 years. Tiffany screamed, "This is corruption," and stormed out, tripping over her oversized purse, which brought the courtroom down in applause and cheer. Outside, Mitch handed me a custom-made t-shirt, trenched by Claire. The video of the crash and the courtroom meltdown hit 3 million views by sundown. Within weeks, the harassing stopped. The peace returned, the kind that hums like wind through tall grass. Sheriff Jedediah chuckled when I asked about her. Last I heard, she's packing up, moving somewhere with more civilized neighbors. Florida, I reckon. Today, the trench is still there. The spring rains filled it halfway, turning it into a small pond. Ducks have moved in. It's a dark, beautiful scar on the earth. Proof that even the ugliest conflicts can grow something new. I put up a new metal sign, gleaming in the sunlight. Private property. Trespassers will be trenched. Half warning, half joke. But around here, everyone knows which half I mean. Peace doesn't trend on social media, but it sure sleeps better. Tiffany Thorne fell into a literal hole that day. But the truth is, she dug it herself long before. With every insult, every trespass, and every smug wave, the trench wasn't just a ditch, it was a line. A reminder that boundaries aren't walls, they're agreements. And if you break them long enough, eventually, the ground gives way. So, tell me in the comments below, have you ever had a Tiffany Thorne in your life? Someone who couldn't see the line between mine and yours. What did you do to stand your ground? Let me know, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because next time, well, let's just say the WA might find out what happens when they mess with a rancher's water rights.